name is Evan Caro. I was 17 when my father decided to take my sister and me camping on a remote island off the northern coast of Ontario. That was 12 years ago, though it still feels close enough to touch. The smell of wet pine, the chill that rolled off the lake at dawn, and the sound of his voice calling from the shallows before he vanished. My father never made it back from that trip, and the island, as far as I know, still stands waiting, ringed by the same black pines that seem to lean closer each night. He had always been a man drawn to solitude. My mother used to say he could sit in a room full of people and somehow still look lonely. After the divorce, that loneliness sharpened. He began talking about places with no cell towers, no roads, no noise, just water, trees, and sky. When he picked us up that July, the truck was already packed: a canvas tent, 2 coolers, his old Coleman lantern, and a folded map with a red circle drawn around an unnamed island in the middle of Lake Nipigon. "You won't find it online," he told us, smiling like he'd caught a secret. "The locals call it Crow Island, but it's not on any public registry. Just crown land, free and empty." My sister Nora was 15, a city kid through and through. She rolled her eyes, tugging at her phone signal bar like she could stretch it out. I remember thinking that maybe this trip was his way of reclaiming us, patching over the years of distance between him and Mom, between him and us. But if that was his goal, the island had other plans. The drive north took nearly 12 hours. We stopped once for gas, once for sandwiches, and again at a faded bait shop where the owner, a leathery man with silver eyebrows, stared too long at the map in my father's hand. "You sure you're headed there?" he asked, voice low. "Frau Island's not exactly a campsite. Used to be a fur post there, back before the fire." "What fire?" my father asked. The man shrugged. "Didn't stop burning, or so they said. Nothing but rock and pines now. No animals either." He flicked his eyes toward me and Nora. "You keep your kids close, you hear?" My father laughed it off, tossed a few lures on the counter, and we left. I tried to tell myself the man was just superstitious. Plenty of old Canadians up north have stories like that. But as we drove farther, the forests thickened, and the sky dimmed into a bruise-colored dusk. The road turned from asphalt to gravel, then to a dirt path that ended at a small marina. We loaded our gear into a rental boat. My father started the outboard motor and guided us out onto the lake, the water slick as glass under the fading light. The island appeared an hour later, just a dark smudge against the horizon. As we drew closer, I noticed how the trees seemed too dense, the shoreline uneven, with pale driftwood tangled like bones along the sand. We landed on a rocky inlet. The air was still, but I felt watched. Not in the way you do when someone's staring, but as though the island itself had noticed us. My father climbed out first, his boots crunching over the gravel. "Perfect spot," he said. "We'll set up by that ridge." We built camp just off the beach. The tent went up quickly. Nora lit the lantern while I gathered firewood. By the time the first stars broke through, we were sitting around the fire, eating canned chili and listening to the lake lap against the stones. For a while, everything felt peaceful, the kind of peace that makes you forget anything bad could happen. Then, just before turning in, my father said something strange. "Don't wander past the tree line," he told us. "Not after dark. Islands play tricks with sound. You think you're near camp when you're not." I nodded. Nora smirked, pretending not to care, but I noticed she kept glancing at the forest anyway. The pines were tall and close, their tops swaying even though there was no wind. When I looked long enough, I thought I saw movement deeper in, something pale slipping between the trunks. I told myself it was moonlight. That first night I woke to a sound I couldn't place. Not an animal, not the waves. It was a kind of low humming, steady and soft, like a single note played on a distant flute. It came from somewhere near the ridge. I unzipped the tent and peeked out. The fire had died down to embers, and everything else was motionless. But the hum continued. Too even to be natural. I wanted to wake my father, but something about the sound made me hesitate. It wasn't threatening. Exactly. Just wrong, like hearing a tune with no rhythm. I listened for what felt like an hour before sleep finally dragged me back down. By morning, the sound was gone. My father was already up, boiling coffee over the rekindled fire. He looked well rested, content even, as if the island suited him. "Sleep all right?" he asked. "Yeah, I lied. Just some weird noises." He chuckled. "That's the woods for you. Everything sounds alive at night." We spent the day exploring. The island wasn't large, maybe 2 kilometers across, but it was easy to get turned around. The pines grew thick over steep ridges, their roots twisting like black veins through the soil. We found remnants of something near the center, stacked stones forming the corner of what might have been an old cabin, and a rusted hook hanging from a beam buried in moss. My father said it must have been part of the trading post. There was also a circle of rocks, half collapsed, filled with ash. It didn't look old enough to be from the 1800s, but I didn't mention that. That night the humming returned, louder this time, and closer. It woke all 3 of us. My father sat up listening, probably wind through the trees. He murmured, though his voice lacked conviction. "One doesn't sound like music," Nora said quietly. We stayed still for a long time, the sound pulsing faintly through the tent walls. Then, all at once, it stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, pressing in until I could hear my own heartbeat. When dawn came, my father decided to hike to the island's northern shore to map the terrain. "Stay near camp," he told us. "If I'm not back by sundown, start the fire. It'll help me find you." He left with his compass, his knife, and a small backpack. We watched him disappear into the trees, his figure swallowed by the pines. The hours stretched. Nora tried to distract herself, skipping stones at the water's edge. But I couldn't shake a sense that the island had shifted somehow. The trees seemed thicker, the air more still. Around noon, I climbed partway up the ridge to get a better view. That's when I saw it, a figure standing far inland, beyond a grove of birch. It looked like my father, same jacket, same stance. But something was off. His head tilted too far to one side, like he was listening for something. I shouted, waving both arms. He didn't move. I blinked, and the space between the birch trees was empty again. When I returned to camp, Nora was sitting by the fire pit, pale. "A van?" she said. "Did Dad come back already?" "Why?" "Because someone unzipped the tent." I froze. She pointed at the flap. The zipper was halfway down, the fabric slightly open. Inside, nothing was missing, but the lantern had been turned on. We built up the fire and waited. Evening came and waited. The lake turned to glass again, and the first tendrils of fog began to rise from its surface. By midnight, the world was a wall of white. Then came the humming. This time it was all around us, echoing from the trees and the shore. The same single note, steady as breath. We huddled near the flames, too scared to move. Out of the mist, a shape approached. "Dad," I called. The shape stopped. It was human-sized, maybe 20 feet away. Through the fog, I saw what looked like a man, but the proportions were wrong. The arms hung too long, the neck too straight. Then it took one step forward, and the fog around it seemed to pulse, as if something larger moved behind it. "Dad!" Nora screamed. The figure tilted its head. The humming stopped for a heartbeat. The only sound was the crackle of fire. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, came another sound. A sharp, wet-tearing noise, followed by something heavy collapsing onto earth. We ran into the tent and zipped it shut, clutching the flashlight between us. I kept the beam aimed at the fabric, watching for shadows. None came. But as I sat there shaking, I realized the humming had returned, faintly, almost below hearing. This time, though, it wasn't one tone, it was 2. One low, one high, weaving around each other like voices trying to harmonize. When morning came, the fog was gone. My father wasn't back. We searched the island for hours. No tracks, no broken branches, nothing to prove he'd ever walked that way. But at the northern shore, where the rocks sloped into the lake, I found his compass lying open on the ground. The needle spun slowly, not pointing anywhere at all. That night I made a fire and waited for the sound again. It came just after dark, rising from the same ridge where I'd first heard it. But this time it carried words. Not clear, not human, but close enough to understand. It was calling my name. At first I thought I was imagining it, The way fog can bend sound and make your own thoughts echo back. But the voice said my name again, drawn out through the trees like the wind carrying heat from a fire you can't see. Avan. It came from the ridge. Nora gripped my sleeve. Tell me you heard that. I nodded, unable to speak. The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the dark, and somewhere beyond the light, something moved. Not footsteps, more like the shift of weight through needles and soil. Then silence again. We didn't sleep that night. When dawn came, the world looked ordinary. Blue sky, calm lake, birdsong that sounded almost staged after so much quiet. It was hard to believe anything strange had happened. But the compass still spun when I picked it up, the needle twitching like it was alive. We spent the morning searching again, retracing the same path toward the ridge. Every tree looked the same. The air was damp and heavy. After maybe an hour, Nora stopped. Avan, look, a boot print, half filled with water, pressed deep into the moss. My father's size. It pointed inland, toward a slope of rock mottled with lichen. We followed. The prints came in pairs at first, spaced like someone walking with purpose. Then they widened, longer strides, irregular, until they ended abruptly at the base of a cedar. There was something else there too. The ground was torn up like claws had raked through it. Not bear marks, these were too long, too even. A smell hung in the air, sweet and metallic. Nora gagged. That's blood. I crouched and touched the edge of one mark. My fingertips came away red-brown, already drying. I wanted to call out, but something in me whispered not to. The forest was listening. We returned to camp by mid-afternoon, shaken and quiet. Nora sat near the water, hugging her knees, while I checked the food supply. My hands trembled the whole time. It felt wrong to eat, wrong to move, wrong to pretend this was still a normal trip. By evening, the lake turned glassy again. The wind had died completely. Even the insects were gone. I built the fire higher than before, partly for warmth, partly to convince my flight meant safety. Around midnight, the humming returned. Louder, layered, as though dozens of unseen throats were drawing the same note from somewhere beneath the ground. The sound vibrated in my chest. Then, over it, came my father's voice, clear, close. Avan, Nora by the fire. Nora bolted upright. Dad. I almost answered. Almost. But something in the tone stopped me. It was too measured, like someone reciting words they'd only just learned. The pitch was perfect, emotionless. Nora took a step toward the tree line. I caught her arm. That's not him. How can you know? Because he'd never call us both like that. He'd say kids, or you too, not our names. She froze, the realization flickering across her face. The voice called again, closer this time, as though moving around the perimeter of our camp. The humming shifted with it, surrounding us. Then came the smell, wet earth, rot, and something faintly electrical, like ozone before a storm. The fire sputtered and leaned sideways, though there was no wind. We huddled together, waiting for it to end. It didn't. The voice began to whisper fragments of things only he would know. Our old dog's name. The brand of cereal Nora used to hoard. Phrases lifted straight from home, twisted just slightly out of rhythm. Each sentence fell flatter than the last, like a recording losing power. Finally it said, "Open the tent, Evan." I shut my eyes. The air around the fire shimmered. I could feel it. A pressure, a heat that pulsed like breath. Then, just as quickly as it came, it was gone. The forest released its grip. Crickets started again. Nora cried quietly until morning. When the sun rose, the beach was covered in footprints, dozens of them circling the fire pit and leading to the water. Some were bare, some half, formed as if pressed by hands instead of feet. We packed what we could. The boat was moored just beyond the rocks, but the fog had rolled back in, thick and white, cutting visibility to a few meters. The island seemed smaller, folded in on itself. Maybe we can signal someone, Nora said. I shook my head. Nobody comes out this far. We decided to follow the shoreline east, hoping to loop back toward the inlet. The fog muffled everything. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps behind us, perfectly matching ours. When we stopped, so did they. After an hour, we reached a cove I didn't recognize. A black stump jutted from the sand, carved with deep vertical grooves. It looked like an old totem, but the shapes didn't belong to any animal I knew. Long faces, open mouths, rows of teeth. "What is that?" Nora whispered. Before I could answer, the humming started again, rising from beneath the sand. The ground trembled. "Run." We sprinted along the beach, tripping over driftwood and rock. The sound chased us, louder with each step, until we broke through the fog into open air. Our camp was gone. The fire pit, the tent, the coolers. Everything had been dragged inland. I could see faint trails carved through the dirt, as if the ground itself had pulled them away. We followed the marks up the ridge. The air turned colder. The forest ahead opened into a clearing I hadn't seen before. In the center stood what looked like the remnants of that old stone circle, only now it was intact. The rocks were arranged precisely, glowing faintly from within as if reflecting firelight that wasn't there. Inside the circle lay our tent, flattened. My father's backpack sat beside it, unzipped. I stepped forward before Nora could stop me. "Dad." Something moved behind the stones. A figure unfolded from the shadows, tall, thin, wearing his jacket. For one impossible moment I believed it really was him. Then it turned its head. The face was wrong, features stretched, skin taut and gray, eyes too dark to catch the light. It raised a hand in greeting, or imitation of one. The gesture was slow and certain, like it was learning how. Nora screamed. I grabbed her wrist, dragging her back down the slope. The thing didn't follow right away. It just watched, head tilting again and again like an owl studying prey. We didn't stop until we reached the shore. The fog had cleared enough to see the boat, still tied to a boulder. Relief hit so hard it made me dizzy. We threw in the essentials and pushed off, the motor coughing to life. As the island receded, I saw movement along the ridge. Not one shape, many, dozens of them, tall and still, lining the tree line like spectators. Nora didn't look back. We steered east, following what I hoped was the same route we'd come. But the lake had changed. The landmarks were wrong, the currents strange. After an hour, the compass still spun uselessly, and the shoreline vanished behind sheets of fog. "Keep going," I said. "I am." Her voice cracked. "Avan, I can't tell what direction we're moving." Then the motor sputtered and died. We drifted. Silence closed in except for the water lapping against the hull. I tried to restart the engine, but it only coughed once before dying again. That's when I noticed the reflection. The surface of the lake had gone perfectly still, too still. Our faces looked back at us, clear as mirrors, but the reflections didn't match. Mine blinked a second late. Nora's mouth was open though she wasn't speaking. I turned away, heart hammering. "Don't look at it." The air around us shimmered. The humming began again, this time rising from the water itself. Ripples spread outward though nothing touched the surface. Beneath us, something vast moved, slow, deliberate, circling the boat. Nora gripped my arm. "Ivan, it's under us." A shape brushed the hull. Then another. The boat rocked gently as if nudged from below. "We're heading back," I said. "We have to." We turned the oars, rowing blind into fog. Minutes or hours passed. The humming faded, replaced by a soft, rhythmic tapping against the metal hull. It took me too long to realize it was coming from inside the boat. A lump formed under the tarp near the bow. Small at first, then rising slowly, like someone pressing upward from beneath. The fabric strained. I lifted the paddle, ready to strike, and pulled the tarp away. Nothing, just the gear bag and a puddle of water. Then I saw it, etched into the metal beneath the waterline. A symbol. 3 concentric circles joined by a vertical line. It glowed faintly blue like bioluminescence. The same mark was on the stones of the circle we'd seen on the island. Nora started sobbing. "We're not getting off, are we?" I didn't answer. Eventually the fog thinned enough to show land again. I rowed until my arms gave out, and when the hull scraped rock, I realized we'd come full circle. Crow Island loomed ahead unchanged. We beached the boat in silence. The forest waited, dark and still. "We stay near the shore," I said, "just till morning." We built a small fire beside the water. Nora sat with her back to me, staring into the flames. I kept watch. Every now and then, I thought I saw movement beyond the tree line, the same tall silhouettes shifting between trunks. Just before dawn, I heard footsteps behind us. I spun, heart leaping. My father stood there. He looked tired but whole, Same clothes, same expression he always wore when he'd been hiking too long. "You're safe," he said, voice rough. "I found a path through the ridge. We can leave when the sun's up." Nora ran to him. I hesitated. "Where were you?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Exploring. You know me." But there was something wrong with his eyes. The pupils were too wide for the light, and when he blinked, the movement lagged, just a fraction too slow, like the reflection on the lake. Nora didn't notice. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing with relief. He looked at me over her shoulder and mouthed a single word. "Stay." The tone was flat. No warmth, more like an order than comfort. The humming started again, distant but growing. My father, or what wore his shape, tilted his head, listening. Then he smiled wider, too wide. I took a step back. "You're not him." He didn't deny it. The last thing I remember clearly is Nora turning toward me, confusion written across her face, and the world folding into sound. A vibration that tore through my skull until everything went black. When I woke, the fire was out. The sun had risen. Nora and my father were gone. Only their footprints remained, leading inland toward the ridge. The compass lay beside me, still spinning. The prints led away from the shore like punctuation marks in the sand, half filled by mist. I knelt beside them, touching one heel-shaped dent. Still warm. The dew hadn't settled inside yet. They were real. I called out once, "Nora," and the echo broke apart halfway through the trees, repeating the syllables out of order, like the island was rearranging them before giving them back. I followed anyway. The forest light was strange that morning, golden in patches but thin as smoke between trunks. Every sound felt magnified. The crunch of my boots, the swing of my pack zipper, the rasp of breath against still air. When I glanced behind me, the shoreline was gone. Just trees layered in haze, endless and depthless, as if the island had folded shut around me. After maybe 20 minutes, the path split. One trail curved toward the ridge where the stone circle waited. The other drifted into a gully shaded by ferns. The prints veered into the gully. At the bottom lay a stream barely wider than my hand. It ran clear, but the stones under it were black as coal. The footprints crossed it without breaking stride, but when I stepped, the water burned, ice cold at first, then hot enough to sting. I jumped back, watching steam rise around my boot. The stream hissed softly like it had a voice of its own. Somewhere ahead, a branch snapped. I called again. "Nora," no answer. Then, faintly, I heard humming. Those same twin tones twining together, distant but recognizable. They came from farther upslope, toward the old clearing. I climbed fast. My legs ached. The air grew heavy, electric. When I reached the ridge, the trees thinned, and the clearing opened like a wound in the forest. The circle of stones still glowed, but weaker, as if pulsing with breath. In its center stood Nora. She faced away, hair matted with dew, hands hanging at her sides. My father, or the thing that wore him, stood opposite her. They didn't move. Between them shimmered a faint distortion, like heat over asphalt warping the air. I started forward, but a sound stopped me. A whisper from the tree line behind. "Don't step in." I spun. Another figure crouched in the shadows. A man, thin and bearded, clothes torn, eyes wide and sunken. He looked half feral. "Who are you?" I asked. He lifted a trembling finger toward the circle. "That's not them anymore?" My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "They belong to it. The island keeps what answers." His voice cracked. "You called it. You heard it call back." Same as I did. I studied him closer. His jacket was patched with canvas from a long, faded logo. Ontario Parks. The same department that managed the lake's conservation zone. "You're a ranger." "Was." He swallowed. "Came here years ago after the fire reports. Whole crew vanished. I stayed too long trying to map the sounds." "The sounds." He nodded toward the humming. "It's not wind, it's memory. The island remembers what steps here. Sometimes it tries to put them back together." I looked again at the clearing. Nora shifted slightly, her movements slow and stuttering, like she was caught between frames. My father's head turned in perfect synchrony, mirroring her. The distortion brightened. "What happens if I pull her out?" The man shook his head. "You can't. The line's drawn. Cross it and it takes you too. But she's my sister. He stared, sympathy flickering behind exhaustion. "Then you'd better find another way to unmake the circle." "How?" "Break its heart." He pointed at the center where the air shimmered thickest. "That's where it feeds." Before I could ask more, a branch snapped behind me. The ranger's eyes widened. "Run!" I turned. Too slow, something tall burst from the trees, all limbs in shadow. Its skin the color of wet ash. It moved wrong, like its joints were hinned backward. I swung the hatchet from my pack and slashed. The blade met resistance softer than flesh, like cutting through packed moss. The creature shrieked, high, metallic, and the ground trembled. "Go," the ranger yelled. He lunged, shoving me downhill as the thing caught him instead. They collapsed into the brush, his scream swallowed by the humming. I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs tore and the light dimmed behind the canopy. When I finally stopped, the sound had faded to a faint vibration underfoot, like a heartbeat deep in the soil. I dropped beside a fallen log, gasping. My thoughts blurred. Nora's face frozen in that trance. My father's imitation smile, the ranger's final cry. It all felt detached, as if I were remembering someone else's nightmare. Then the forest spoke. Not in words this time, images. Memories that weren't mine flickered across my mind, the crackle of fire on dry pine, men shouting, smoke rolling across the island decades ago. A trading post consumed by flame. Bodies dragged toward the lake. The echo of prayers in a language I didn't know. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the visions poured through anyway, carried on that ever-present hum. When it finally eased, I realized the sun had shifted west. I'd lost hours. The silence after felt like a trick. I forced myself upright, scanning for bearings. The lake couldn't be far. If I could reach the shore, maybe I could signal for help, or at least put water between me and whatever ruled the center. I stumbled downhill through brush until the trees thinned and the shoreline reappeared, bronze in late light. The boat was gone. Only a chain lay coiled on the rocks, and snapped clean through as if cut by heat. Something moved in the shallows, ripples circling outward though no wind touched the surface. I backed away. The humming started again, this time below the water. The ripples tightened into a spiral, revealing a dark shape rising beneath. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was both, an outline made of shifting light, forming faces for half a second before dissolving. My father's, then Nora's, then others I didn't recognize. They looked at me through the surface, like trapped reflections begging for breath. The water bulged outward, and a single voice formed from all of them. "Stay." I stumbled backward, tripping over driftwood. The moment my boot left the wet sand, the lake fell still. I waited until my heartbeat slowed, then scanned the beach. A narrow cliff rose to my left, stone fractured into ledges that might offer a view. I climbed using roots for handholds, scraping my palms raw. At the top, the forest stretched endless and green, but in its center glowed the faint halo of the stone circle, pulsing like a beacon. I could see movement around it, figures gathering, too many to count. All the same height, all moving in the same slow rhythm, swaying with the hum. I whispered to myself, "Break its heart." If the island was alive, that circle was its pulse. And if it fed on what it remembered, maybe fire, real fire, could starve it. I climbed back down and scavenged what I could: the spare fuel canister, a half-empty box of matches sealed in plastic, strips of birch bark. When darkness fell, I started toward the ridge again. The woods were quiet. Even the hum had lowered to a faint vibration, like it was sleeping. Moonlight silvered the path. I moved slowly, afraid to think too loudly. Halfway there, I found the ranger's hat. Nothing else. Just that, and drag marks leading into the soil. When I reached the clearing, the air shimmered with faint heat. The figures were gone. Only Nora remained in the circle, kneeling beside something glowing faintly beneath her hands. The stones pulsed brighter each time she exhaled, as if drawing energy from her breath. I crept closer until I could see the source, a fissure in the ground, narrow but deep, filled with that same blue light as the markings on the boat. It wasn't fire, it was liquid, moving like molten glass. I pulled the fuel canister from my pack and unscrewed the cap. The smell hit me, sharp, chemical, real. "Nora," I whispered, "if you can hear me." Don't move." She didn't react. Her lips moved faintly, mouthing a word I couldn't hear. I stepped into the ring of stones. The humming surged instantly, vibrating up through my legs into my chest. My vision blurred, edges doubling. The stones burned hot beneath my boots. I splashed the fuel across the fissure. The liquid hissed as it hit, scattering sparks of blue light. Then I struck the match. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the ground roared. Flame shot up, white at the center, blinding. The hum turned into a scream, metallic, layered, every pitch at once. I fell backward, hands over ears, as the light swallowed the clearing. When it faded, the stones lay cracked and smoking. The fissure had closed to a scar of black glass. Nora was gone. I staggered to my feet, throat raw from the heat. The forest was silent again, completely unnaturally silent. I called her name once, then again. Nothing, only the smell of burnt sap. At the edge of the clearing, I found something half buried in ash, her necklace. A small silver feather charm bent from heat. I pocketed it numb. As I started back toward the shore, dawn broke over the lake. The light looked clean for the first time since we'd arrived. The fog had lifted. Birds sang again. For a moment, I thought I'd done it, that I'd killed whatever lived here. Then I heard the voice, soft, familiar, coming from behind me. "Evan." I turned. Nora stood among the trees. Same clothes, same hair, smiling faintly. "You came back," she said. My heart lurched. "Nora, how did you?" But as she stepped into the light, her shadow didn't match her body. It lagged half a second behind, bending the wrong way when she moved. Her smile held too long. I took a step back. She tilted her head. "It's okay now. We can go home." Behind her, deeper in the woods, others stepped out. Figures wearing faces I almost knew. My father among them, the ranger. All smiling. The humming began again, soft and low, pulsing like the first night on the island. Nora reached out a hand. "Stay." I turned and ran. The sound followed, chasing me through trees that seemed to twist inward, narrowing the path. My lungs burned. The forest blurred into streaks of gray and green until suddenly I broke through the brush and saw the lake ahead. A boat waited on the shore. Not ours. Older, wooden, half-rotted, but upright, oars resting inside. I didn't think, just leapt in and shoved off. As the current caught, the humming faded. The island shrank behind me, dark and still, ringed by smoke. For the first time in days, I couldn't hear my name in the wind. Hours later, when I reached open water, I looked back. The fog was returning, coiling low around the trees, and just before it swallowed the island completely, I saw them on the shore, my father, Nora, and the others, watching. Their faces were calm, patient, like they were waiting for something they knew would come. Because maybe it doesn't end when you leave. Maybe that's the trick. The compass in my pocket stopped spinning. For the first time since he vanished, it pointed north again, and from somewhere beneath the waves, faint and certain, came the echo of my own voice. "Stay." The lake carried me farther than I meant to go. The fog folded in again, soft as breath, until I couldn't tell if I was drifting or still. My hands blistered from rowing. Each pull made the water glow faintly around the oars, blue like the fissure I'd burned shut. By noon, or what felt like noon, the sun was only a dull circle behind the mist. My stomach ached with hunger, but the thought of food made me sick. I tried to follow the compass, but the needle had begun spinning again, faster now, like it wanted out of the glass. Hours passed, or minutes. I couldn't tell anymore. At some point the wind shifted, bringing a smell I hadn't noticed since the island, smoke and wet pine. The fog thinned just enough to reveal another boat drifting ahead of me. Wooden, old, half-submerged at one end. I rowed closer, calling out. No answer. The hull was marked with peeling letters, Marin Coast A78. The inside held a lantern, rusted solid, and a single boot lying on its side. Water sloshed around it, dark but still. I reached for the lantern, then stopped. A reflection moved in the water. Someone standing behind me. I spun. Nothing there. When I looked back, the other boat had drifted farther away. Or maybe I had. The mist played tricks with distance, making near things far and far things near. Eventually both boats drifted apart until mine was alone again. The humming started soon after, faint at first, then stronger, curling up through the hull like the wood itself was singing. I leaned over the edge, expecting to see light under the surface, but there was only black water and my own reflection. This time it didn't wait a second to move. It smiled first. I shoved back, heart pounding. "Not real," I said aloud. "Not anymore." But the reflection opened its mouth wider, and words rose from the water. Not sound exactly, more vibration translated by my bones. "You burned the heart," it said. "It only sleeps." I rowed harder, not caring where. My arms shook. The sky darkened again, and I realized I was rowing toward lights, a faint golden glow flickering through the fog like campfires. Hope flared hard enough to hurt. As I drew closer, the lights multiplied. Torches, lanterns. Dozens of them arranged in a line across the water. I thought they were boats at first, until I saw they didn't move. They hovered just above the surface, their reflections hanging upside down beneath them. The humming deepened. I tried to steer around, but the oars hit resistance. Thick water, heavy as syrup. The air smelled metallic again, like something heating beyond sight. One of the lanterns drifted closer. Inside it burned a cold, colorless flame that cast no shadow. The glass was etched with the same three-circle mark. When it touched my boat, the flame inside flared blue. A voice came from the lantern itself. "Log entry 17, it said calmly. "Fru lost at 45 north. Sound continues, then silence." Another lantern drifted near. "Entry 18, it murmured. "Subject 2 absorbed. Pattern stable." They were speaking in sequence, one after another, as though reporting to each other, like fragments of a logbook scattered across the lake, still broadcasting. The oar slipped from my hand and vanished beneath the surface. I grabbed for it, and when my fingers broke the water, I felt something soft. Fabric, maybe. I pulled. A life jacket surfaced, bloated and pale, the name H. Dawes scrawled across the inside in marker. I knew that name. The ranger had said it before he died. One of his missing crew. The jacket drifted away, joining the slow circle of lights that now surrounded me. The humming synchronized with my heartbeat, rising in pitch until it hurt to breathe. Then, all at once, it stopped. The lights went out. Darkness dropped so completely I could hear the blood in my ears. I waited for the next impossible thing to happen, but instead a single bell rang somewhere distant, low and deliberate. Another answered. Then another, farther still. Through the fog, shapes began to appear. Roofs, docks, the faint outline of a town. Wooden facades leaned over the water, their reflections rippling below. It looked abandoned yet alive, a ghost of itself floating above the lake. I drifted closer until the bow nudged against a piling. The wood beneath my hands felt solid enough. I climbed onto the dock. My boots hit with a dull thud, echoing through the quiet. The town stretched inland, or what passed for inland. Rows of narrow streets, empty storefronts, windows boarded yet glowing faintly from inside. I walked past a sign half buried in moss. Fort Claremont, trading post and dock, established 1823. The name hit me. That was the post the bait shop owner had mentioned. The one that didn't stop burning. Smoke curled above the roofs, thin and white. I followed it to a square at the town's center. In the middle stood a clock tower without hands. The face glowed dimly, like embers behind glass. Around its base lay dozens of boats half sunk into the cobblestones, each one tethered by frayed rope. On one of them sat a man in uniform, another ranger's coat, cap pulled low. He was motionless, staring into the tower's glow. I called out, "Sir!" You didn't answer." When I reached him, I saw why. His face was perfectly preserved, eyes open, skin pale as wax. No rot, no smell. Just stillness, as though he'd paused mid-breath years ago. The tag on his coat read H. Dawes. Something clattered behind me. I turned to see another figure step from a doorway, then another. They were all frozen the same way, mid-motion, mid-sentence, caught between living and gone. Men, women, even children, their clothes from different decades, all preserved by the same gray sheen. As I backed away, the tower chimed once. The sound rolled through the town like a wave, and every figure turned its head toward me in unison. Their eyes weren't eyes anymore, just black glass. They spoke together, one voice woven from many. "You came back." I ran. The dock reappeared where the street should have been, leading straight into water. I jumped into the boat, shoving away from the pilings. The figures watched from the shore, unmoving as the fog folded over them again. The lake swallowed the last of the town's glow. For a long time I rode blind, muscles shaking, until the sky began to pale. The fog broke apart like smoke after a burn, revealing open water stretching in every direction. The compass had settled again, pointing north. I followed it. By evening I saw land, low hills covered in spruce, nothing like Crow Island. Relief made me cry without sound. I rode until my arms refused to lift. When the hull scraped gravel, I stumbled ashore and collapsed on cold sand. For the first time since the island, there was birdsong that didn't echo wrong. The air smelled clean. I almost laughed. I built a small fire from driftwood and sat beside it, waiting for night. But when darkness came, the horizon still glowed faintly blue. Not like dawn, like something beneath the lake was alive, breathing light through miles of water. Every few seconds a pulse ran through it, faint but steady. I told myself it was memory, shock, anything rational. Yet the longer I watched, the more it looked like the heartbeat of something vast, waiting for me to stop pretending. At some point I dozed off. I woke to the sound of oars. A boat was gliding toward the shore, cutting across the glowing water. In it sat a single figure, small, hunched too far to see clearly. I called out, no reply. The boat drifted closer until moonlight touched the passenger's face. It was Nora. Her skin looked normal now, her expression calm. She raised a hand, the same motion she'd made in the clearing. "Avan," she said softly. "It's all right." I found the path. I stepped back. "You're not real. Neither are you," she said. "Not anymore. You stayed too long." The oars dipped again, but the water didn't ripple. The boat slid forward without sound until its bow touched the sand. She stood, holding out her hand. "Come home." Behind her, through the fog, I saw others, boats lined in rows, each carrying a single figure, all motionless, all facing me. The humming returned, softer this time, almost tender. I ran up the beach into the trees, not caring where they led. Branches whipped my face. The ground tilted upward, then leveled again. When I finally stopped, panting, I couldn't see the lake anymore, only endless forest under thin moonlight. I collapsed against a trunk. The compass in my pocket still pointed north. I turned it over, trying to steady my breathing, and noticed something new etched faintly into the glass, that same 3-circle mark, glowing beneath the surface like it had always been there, waiting for light to find it. I dropped it. The glow stayed on my palm, imprinting itself into skin. Then the forest started to hum. It was faint, like memory reviving, rising from the soil. The sound traveled through roots, through bark, through air, until the trees themselves seemed to breathe in rhythm. Somewhere beyond them, I heard water again, lapping against wood. Boats, hundreds of them, rocking gently to a pulse older than the island. I pressed my back to the tree and whispered, "I didn't stay." The forest answered with my voice, "You did." When dawn came, the humming faded. The trees stood normal again. My skin had stopped glowing, leaving only faint scars shaped like rings. The lake lay silent below, bright and clean in the morning light. I couldn't tell where the island had been. Maybe it never had. Maybe it moved, carrying its memories with it, waiting for whoever looked too long into still water. I started walking north, following the compass even though I no longer trusted it. Every few minutes it twitched toward the lake, like a needle tugged by breath. By midday, the sound of the forest had returned to ordinary life. Wind, birds, my own steps, almost enough to make me believe escape was possible, almost. Then the needle spun once more, and somewhere behind me a bell rang. The bell came once, then again, closer this time, not from the lake but inland, muffled by trees. I froze mid-step. The air felt still, as if holding its breath. It rang a third time. The sound wasn't sharp, more like metal struck underwater. Dull, delayed. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe wind against an old boy, a memory of sound carried by the lake. But the direction was wrong. The echo came from ahead, deeper in the woods. I started walking. The path sloped upward through birch and spruce. Morning light fell in broken patterns across the moss, turning everything too beautiful to trust. After an hour, the forest thinned, revealing a clearing filled with mist. In the center stood a wooden chapel. Its roof had half collapsed, the bell tower leaning like a man too tired to stand straight. Ivy crawled up the walls. Through the open door I saw pews warped by rain, a pulpit draped in cobwebs, and the faint shimmer of dust moving like breath in the sunbeams. The bell above clanged once more. It swung slow and heavy, though there was no rope, no wind. Inside smelled of mold and candle wax. The air was warmer, as if someone had just been there. I moved down the aisle, boots creaking against warped boards. Behind the pulpit hung a painting, 3 concentric circles carved into the wood. The same mark burned into my palm. Beneath it, in faded script, "He who returns becomes the memory." The words made my chest tighten. I ran my thumb over the burn on my hand and felt the faintest hum. A whisper came from behind the pulpit. "Ivan." I spun. No one. Only a wooden hatch half open in the floor, leading into blackness. Cold air drifted up, carrying the smell of wet earth. "Ivan," the voice said again, softer, as if waiting below. For a moment I believed it really was Nora. The same tone, same fragile calm. I knelt, shining my flashlight through the gap. The beam hit stairs spiraling down into stone. The air trembled faintly with sound, a heartbeat hidden in rock. I hesitated. Then I started down. The steps were slick, each one carved by hand. The farther I went, the warmer it grew, until sweat trickled down my spine. At the bottom lay a small chamber shaped like a well. The walls were lined with carvings, faces half-formed, mouths open as if mid-scream. In the center stood a shallow pool of water, glowing faintly blue, the same light as the fissure. I crouched, staring at my reflection. It looked normal, tired, pale, shaking, but then its eyes blinked before mine did. I stumbled back. The reflection didn't follow. It smiled slow and steady. "You left us," it said. The voice wasn't Nora's, it was mine. I gripped the wall, breath sharp. "You're not me." The reflection tilted its head. "Aren't I?" "You burned the circle, but you didn't close it. You carried it." It lifted its hand, my hand, and showed the glowing scar that pulsed faintly under the skin. "Every name it takes," it whispered, "it keeps. Every survivor becomes its next voice." The light beneath the water brightened, filling the chamber until the walls seemed to melt. Faces stretched toward me, mouths opening wider. I scrambled up the stairs, nearly falling, the sound of the bell following me up like laughter. When I burst out into daylight, the forest had changed. The trees were in the same places, but the leaves had turned the color of ash, as if months had passed. The sun hung lower than it should have. I ran, following what I thought was north, until the ground broke into rock and the tree line ended. Below stretched another lake, smaller, ringed by reeds and fog. Not Nipigon, somewhere else. A figure stood near the water, back turned, throwing stones that never made a splash. I called out before I thought. The figure turned. It was a boy, maybe 12, wearing a life jacket too big for him. His face looked familiar in that strange, half-remembered way, like seeing an old photo of yourself. "Are you lost?" I asked. He shrugged. "Been here a while. What's your name?" "Dawes," he said. "Henry. My dad used to work for the park." The name chilled me, the ranger. Henry looked at my hands. "You got marked too." He stepped closer, squinting at my palm. "It means it knows you. You won't drown now. You'll just come back different." "Come back from where?" He smiled faintly, like he'd already forgotten the question. "You'll see." Then he turned toward the lake again, tossed another stone, and vanished mid-motion. No fade, no ripple, just gone. The air where he'd been still smelled faintly of salt. I stumbled backward, heartbeat roaring. The sky darkened without warning, clouds rolling in fast. The first raindrop hit my cheek, warm, not cold, and when I wiped it away, my fingers came back red. Rain of blood, thin, diluted, falling in steady rhythm. I ran toward the tree line, but the forest no longer matched what I'd left. The trunks leaned inward, branches woven together overhead. The sound of the bell had become constant now, not ringing but breathing. Each pulse felt inside my ribs. By nightfall, I reached another clearing, an old campsite. 3 tents all collapsed, half swallowed by moss. A metal sign lay bent in the mud, "Survey Team 1984. Inside one tent, everything was still set, sleeping bags, lantern. Notebooks stacked neatly as if waiting for their owners to return. I lit the lantern. The flame flickered blue for a moment, then turned yellow. The notebooks were labeled by date. The last entry read, Day 6, strange harmonics from beneath lakebed, compass malfunctioning, one crew member missing. We hear him singing at night, considering evacuation. The page below was blank except for 3 circles drawn in ink, identical to my scar. I closed the notebook. Something moved outside the tent, slow footsteps circling. I blew out the light and crouched low. The flap lifted. A man's silhouette filled the opening, face hidden by shadow. He crouched, whispering, "Did it mark you too?" I didn't answer. He stepped closer. His skin shimmered faintly like heat over metal. "It needs a keeper," he said. "Someone to remember the way back." When the light flashed, just lightning, I think, I saw his face, my father's, but not exactly. The features were melting, sliding, reforming like wax too near a flame. "You left me," he said calmly, "but I found the path." I crawled backward until my hand hit the notebook pile. I grabbed one and hurled it at him. It passed straight through, scattering pages that spun like birds before dissolving into the air. When the light flashed again, he was gone. I didn't sleep. At dawn, the lake's surface outside had turned solid white, like frozen glass. I stepped onto it. The ice didn't crack. Below, shadows moved, slow drifting shapes that sometimes took human outlines, sometimes didn't. I walked until the forest vanished behind me, until there was only horizon. The bell still sounded somewhere beneath the ice, regular as a clock. Eventually, I reached the center. Embedded in the ice lay a single wooden door. No frame, no walls, just a door facing upward, handle rusted. The sound came from beneath it. I knelt, brushing away frost. The surface glowed faintly. Circles etched into it like every other mark I'd seen. My hand trembled. I knew I shouldn't touch it, but the hum beneath the ice resonated with my heartbeat until they matched perfectly. I touched the handle, warm. The ice cracked, not outward, but downward, pulling me with it. Cold swallowed everything, followed by light so bright it erased shape. When I came to, I was lying in a boat again. Calm water, open sky, sun overhead. The air smelled clean. Birds circled above. For a long time I couldn't move. I thought maybe it was over, that I'd woken up somewhere real. Then I noticed the oars. They weren't wood anymore. They were bone, long and pale, carved with the same rings that burned my hand. And on the horizon far away, another island waited. Not Crow Island, smaller, unfamiliar. But I recognized the sound already rising from it, faint as breath through hollow wood. The humming, it never stopped. It only changed its voice. I looked down at the water. My reflection blinked first. The new island rose from the water like something remembering how to exist. No shorebirds, no wind, just the faint ring of oars cutting the surface. The bone handles were warm in my hands, slick with condensation that smelled faintly of smoke. The closer I came, the more the lake thickened, viscous, reluctant. I beached at a curve of black sand. Every grain shimmered faintly blue, pulsing with the same rhythm as my palm. When I stepped off the boat, the hum slid under my skin and steadied my heartbeat until it wasn't mine anymore. The island was small, half a kilometer across at most. A single hill rose from the center, smooth and treeless, crowned with a circle of standing stones. Even from below I could see light leaking between them, flickering like breath through ribs. Each step inland felt heavier, as though gravity changed with the terrain. By the time I reached the base of the hill, my footprints glowed behind me. They faded slowly like cooling metal. Halfway up, I passed a shape half buried in ash, a camp stove, melted flat. Another few meters, a boot. My father's? No, too small. A child's. The island was layered with leftovers from other crossings, tents. Tools, rusted knives, all sunk into the soil, preserved by whatever kept this place breathing. At the top, the hum deepened into a low chord that vibrated in my teeth. The circle of stones stood taller than I was, each one carved with rings that spiraled inward toward a single hollow pit. The light came from there, slow pulses of blue, white that swelled and receded like lungs. Something moved behind the nearest stone. I raised the hatchet, though it felt useless now, a relic from another kind of world. Nora stepped out. She looked unchanged, no decay, no shadow lag this time. Her eyes were calm, her smile small. "You made it," she said. I wanted to believe her so badly that for a second I did. Then I saw the faint shimmer at the edges of her shape, like heat mirage over asphalt. "You're not her. I'm what's left," she said. The part that learned to stay. Her voice wove with the hum, matching its pitch exactly. The stones around us brightened. "You could stop running," she said. "It's the only way you get to rest." I shook my head. "It wants that? It feeds on it?" She stepped closer. "It doesn't feed. It remembers. You burned the heart, Evan. It needs a new one." Behind her, the light gathered in the pit until it became shape. A column of water rising without spilling, full of faces that drifted up and sank again like air bubbles. My father's floated nearest the surface. His eyes opened. "Son," he said quietly, "it's time to come home." The column pulsed with each word. The hum turned rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat sensing to mine. I backed away. "You're not him either." His expression softened. "Then what are we?" I couldn't answer. The water stretched outward, touching the base of the stones. Where it met the earth, new figures formed, silhouettes of every person the island had ever taken. They stepped forward slowly, moving in the same rhythm, their mouths open but silent. The hum wasn't just sound anymore. It was gravity, thought, heat, everything bending toward the center. My body wanted to follow. I felt each pulse pull my bones forward one fraction of an inch at a time. Nora extended her hand. "Let it finish remembering." Something inside me cracked then. Not courage, not fear, just exhaustion. The idea of rest felt holy, but beneath it, another thought whispered, "If it remembers everything, maybe forgetting is the only escape." I tightened my grip on the hatchet. "Then I'll give it something it can't keep." Before she could move, I swung at the nearest stone. The blade bit deep, splitting the carving. Light burst out, searing white. The hum screamed, shifting pitch so violently it threw me to my knees. The water column convulsed, faces twisted, collapsing into each other. I swung again, and again. Each strike fractured another ring, another memory. The ground shook, cracking open in concentric lines that raced down the hill to the shore. Nora's voice cut through the noise. "You're unmaking yourself." "Good," I said, and hit once more. The last blow split the stone clean through. A surge of light erupted, swallowing everything. The hill, the figures, the sky. For a heartbeat I saw the island's insides, roots of light connecting every object I'd ever seen, threading through water and time. Then they snapped. Silence. When the glare faded, the circle was gone. The stones lay shattered around a crater of glassy sand. The humming had stopped. Even the lake below was still. Nora was standing at the edge of the crater, expression unreadable. "You did it," she said softly. "You gave it silence." The relief came like cold rain, until I noticed the air itself trembling. Not humming, breathing. Slow, deep, pulling the fog back toward the crater. The island wasn't dying. It was waking up. The glass in the pit flexed outward, cracking, and a hand pressed through. Translucent, jointless, shaped from the same light as before. Another followed. The air split open between them, revealing an endless depth of shifting color, like looking into the lake from below instead of above. Every voice I'd ever heard whispered at once, "Stay." The pull returned, stronger than gravity. My feet slid toward the pit. The scar on my palm blazed, heat pouring up my arm until it felt like molten metal. I tried to drop the hatchet, but it fused to my grip. From the corner of my eye, I saw Nora watching. Tears, real or not, cutting paths down her face. "You can't kill memory," she said. "You can only decide which part of it you'll be." The light flared again, pure and total. Inside it I saw glimpses. The bait shopman's face, the ranger's boots, the burning trading post, 1,000 nameless camps flickering like constellations across time. Every person who'd ever touched this water was there, suspended in the same eternal inhale. And at the center something waited. Not a creature exactly, more like a pattern that had learned to wear human shapes. It looked at me through all of them. "You opened the door," it said with my father's voice. "Now you keep it." The pull became absolute. The ground tilted, dragging me toward the pit. I drove the hatchet into the sand, trying to anchor myself, but the blade cut through light instead of soil. It melted into the glow, vanishing like a spark into a furnace. The moment the metal disappeared, the heat in my hand cooled. The scar stopped burning. The pull lessened. The light flickered, confused. I looked at Nora. "Go," I said. She shook her head. "I can't. You already did." The wind rose for the first time in days, whipping through the broken stones. The fog tore apart above us, revealing a sky so bright it hurt. The lake below turned clear, transparent all the way down. I could see the old ruins beneath, the chapel, the clock tower, even the bones of Crow Island folded into the bedrock. I reached toward the crater and pressed my marked hand against the edge. The light met my skin and flinched, retreating like water from oil. The hum stuttered, losing its rhythm. For the first time, the silence belonged to me. Then everything collapsed inward. The island, the light, the air, folding into a single point of brightness that winked out like a closing eye. "Now go!" When I opened my eyes, I was on water again. Same boat, same oars. Ordinary wood now. The sun hung high and warm. Behind me there was no island, only open lake stretching to every horizon. I rowed until my arms ached. No fog followed. The compass needle held steady north. By nightfall, I saw lights on the mainland, small, distant, human. I laughed then, a sound that felt strange in my mouth. When I finally reached shore, the beach was real sand, the kind that left grit between fingers. Trees smelled of sap, not smoke. Somewhere a generator hummed. Civilization. I collapsed beside the boat and slept. I don't know how long. When I woke, the stars were gone. Clouds covered everything. I sat up, heart hammering, and realized the lake behind me was calm, mirror still. In the reflection, I wasn't alone. Nora stood beside me, faint as moonlight. She smiled, not cruel, not kind, just wary. "You closed it?" she said. "No, someone else will find the next door." "Where?" I asked. She tilted her head toward the horizon. "Anywhere that listens too closely." Then she faded, leaving the air heavy with the smell of pine and distant rain. I looked at my hand. The scar was gone. In its place, faintly visible under the skin, was the outline of 3 empty circles. Hollow now, no light inside. I thought I heard the lake exhale. Just once. Then silence. For the first time since my father vanished, there was no hum at all, only the quiet of real water under a real sky. I pushed the boat onto the sand, turned my back to the lake, and started walking inland. Each step left a print that did not glow, that did not fade. Just dirt. And behind me the world stayed still. I reached land 3 days before anyone found me. At least that's what the calendar said. I still don't remember walking the last miles. Just waking up in a ranger station with an IV in my arm and the smell of disinfectant cutting through everything. They told me a fishing trawler spotted my boat drifting near Red Willow Point, over 60 kilometers south of where I'd launched. No one believed the distance. The lake doesn't move that way. The first ranger who spoke to me introduced himself as Captain Dwyer. His beard was trimmed short, his eyes cautious. "You're lucky," he said. "That stretch eats engines and radio signals. Been looking for you folks a long time." I asked about my father and sister. He looked down, reading from a clipboard that didn't need reading. "Missing, presumed drowned. Search discontinued 4 years ago." 4 years. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. I still had sunburns from that week. My nails were the same length. My beard hadn't grown. I told him that. He wrote something on his pad and nodded politely. "You might have been adrift longer than you realized," he said. "Lake Nipigon plays tricks on distance and time. Happens, but later." When I was alone, I checked the mirror above the sink. There were fine lines at the corners of my eyes that hadn't been there before. A thin streak of gray through my hair. Nothing drastic, just wrong in a quiet way. They released me after 2 nights. I told them I lived in Thunder Bay. It wasn't true, but it was close enough to sound normal. They gave me a clean shirt, a bus voucher, and a pamphlet for trauma counseling. The road home didn't feel real. Asphalt, billboards, radio static, everything too crisp after the softness of the fog. I tried to enjoy it, tried to be grateful for noise. But under every engine rumble and conversation, I could still feel that empty rhythm, the absence of hum shaped exactly like the sound itself. I rented a basement apartment near the marina. Cheap, damp, anonymous. The landlord didn't ask questions. I told myself I'd stay just long enough to find work, but each morning I woke later. Each night I stayed up listening to the pipes rattle like wind through trees. On the fifth night I dreamed of the island again, not as it was, but as it should have been. Clean beach, my father gutting fish, Nora laughing, the air bright. The hum was gone, everything perfect, until I noticed the waves weren't moving. They froze mid-crest, and all sounds stopped. I woke with my teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. That morning I bought a cheap recorder from a pawn shop. I told myself it was curiosity. I needed proof that the silence was real. I set it on the counter, pressed record, and waited. At first, nothing but the buzz of the fridge and distant traffic. Then, faintly underneath the note, barely there, the same pitch I'd heard my first night on Crow Island. I threw the recorder against the wall. It shattered. The sound didn't stop. By afternoon it was gone again, leaving only tinnitus and questions. I tried work, loading docks, late shifts, anything to stay moving. But I avoided the lake. Even seeing water in gutters made my stomach twist. I stopped drinking from taps, kept bottled water stacked like barricades around the bed. Sometimes, walking home after midnight, I saw a light on the horizon over the water. Soft blue, pulsing once, twice, then gone. Locals said it was aurora, magnetic storms. I knew better. Months blurred, I grew quieter. People at work called me the island guy. They'd read the news clipping about my miraculous survival. I never corrected them. Let them think it was a rescue story. Then winter came. The lake froze early that year, hard and smooth. From my window I could see snowmobiles cutting lines across it. One morning, a kid skated out too far and fell through. They never found the body. Searchers said the hole sealed itself overnight. That night I heard the bell again. One single note rolling through the air like thunder with nowhere to go. The sound came from beneath my floor. I moved out the next day, packed what little I owned, and rented a room inland, near the paper mills where the air always smelled of smoke. Noise helped. It filled the cracks till sometimes the silence would find me. It wasn't a hum anymore. It was a pause too long between sounds, a breath the world forgot to release. It waited behind music, behind laughter, behind every closing door. Once, during a blackout, I saw shapes in the dark, reflections of faces I hadn't seen since the island. They weren't frightening, just patient watching. After that I started writing everything down. Dates, weather, dreams, trying to prove time still moved forward. Last month I woke to rain tapping the window. Ordinary rain, cold and clean. I held out my hand and let it run across my skin. Clear, not red, not ash. For the first time in years I thought maybe the world had forgiven me. Then I saw the pattern forming in the condensation on the glass, 3 faint rings, touching, then fading. The sound followed, not from outside, but from inside the room. A whisper through the radiator pipes, through the walls. It said only one word. Listen. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound came from deeper. Bones, blood, memory. It didn't hurt. It just felt familiar, like finding a scar you'd forgotten. I realized then that the silence I'd carried home wasn't absence at all. It was seed. The island hadn't followed me. It had spread. That night I dreamed of water again. Not endless this time, but contained like a puddle in the street reflecting the sky. I knelt beside it and saw movement within cities built on docks, towers without clocks, boats drifting without pilots. Every face I'd ever known floated beneath the surface, eyes open, waiting for me to finish remembering. When I woke, the rain had stopped. The window was clear. The hum was gone. I went down to the lake for the first time since that summer. The ice had broken into long channels of open water. People stood on the shore with cameras, taking pictures of the aurora. Green and violet waves rippled across the sky. I walked past them to the edge. The surface reflected everything perfectly. Sky lights people, but not me. My reflection was gone. I watched until the others left one by one. When the last car engine faded, the lake stilled completely. The air carried no echo. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the water, a pulse of blue light rose, spreading outward in perfect circles. I waited for fear. It didn't come. Maybe this was what Nora meant. That silence wasn't peace, just continuity. Maybe every hum, every echo, every forgotten sound eventually finds another body to live in. Maybe mine was just next in line. The light dimmed. The lake went dark. I turned away, walked back toward the road, and didn't look over my shoulder until I reached the first streetlight. The water was calm, but in its reflection, the streetlight flickered once, twice, and held steady. No hum, no echo, just a faint breath in the distance, like someone tuning a note for a song that hasn't started yet. Maybe it never stops. Maybe we just learn to carry it quietly.